Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling something that's probably on your mind as you navigate the world of work. The really rapid changes coming from artificial intelligence in business.
Yeah, it's everywhere now, isn't it?
It really is. So if you're looking to get a clear picture of what's happening, what it means for you, without getting, bogged down in tech jargon, you are definitely in the right place.
Exactly. For you, our listener, maybe you're trying to get ahead or prepare for what's next, or maybe you're just plain curious about AI's impact. Our goal today is pretty simple.
Okay.
We want to pull out the key workforce implications, the ethical stuff too, from a whole bunch of trusted sources. We've looked at Harvard Business School online, BBC reports, thinkers like Abe McCormack, Horton International, Global HR News.
Quite a range.
Yeah, the Economic Innovation Group, IJFMR, McKinsey, SHRM, the whole lot. We're aiming to give you maybe some surprising facts and most importantly, some practical things you can actually use.
Okay, great. Let's dive straight in then. Harvard Business School Online talks about this idea of digital amplification. What exactly are we talking about there? How does AI amplify things?
Well, it's sort of fascinating how AI algorithms can act like a huge spotlight on the internet. They prioritize certain information.
Right.
And because they do that, they can really shape what you see, what becomes, the big topic of conversation.
Like on social media feeds or news sites?
Exactly. Think about how news sites recommend articles or your social feed.
Mm.
The AI is constantly deciding what it thinks will grab your attention. And by doing that, it pushes certain content forward. So it's not just that there's a lot of info out there. AI is actively curating what hits the mainstream. It feels like it knows what you want to see, right?
Yeah, sometimes creepily so.
Right.
So certain things get a much bigger stage. Now, HBS also mentioned Wikipedia as kind of a contrast to this.
Yes, and that's a really good point they made. Wikipedia's model, where it's this huge community constantly editing and reviewing.
Right, the community policing aspect.
Exactly. It acts as a sort of check, a balance against just one viewpoint getting amplified like crazy. Different perspectives can come in, challenge things, hopefully leading to something more rounded.
So how does that relate back to, say, our workplaces?
Well, the takeaway is pretty clear, I think. It really highlights the need for diversity. You need different voices involved when you're building and using these AI systems.
Okay.
And you need to regularly check them, audit them to make sure they aren't accidentally, amplifying one perspective or creating blind spots.
Makes sense. Now, another big ethical piece from that HBS source was algorithmic bias. Can you unpack that a bit?
Yeah, this one's really crucial. Algorithmic bias is basically when an AI system produces outcomes that are unfairly discriminatory.
How does that happen?
It usually comes down to the data it's trained on. If the data itself reflects historical biases, say gender or racial biases, the AI learns those biases.
Yeah.
So think about an AI used to screen resumes. If it was trained mostly on resumes of men who were hired in the past, it might start unfairly filtering out qualified women.
Wow. Okay. That's a serious problem.
It is. It can lead to discriminatory hiring, unequal access to opportunities, all sorts of unfairness right there in the workplace.
So what's the fix? Better data.
That's a huge part of it. Using diverse representative data sets is critical, but it's also about regularly auditing the AI's decisions for fairness and having diverse teams involved in developing and overseeing these systems. You can't just set it and forget it.
Right. Constant vigilance. Okay, let's switch gears a bit. AI anxiety. This came up strongly in the BBC piece. I bet many listening feel this worry about jobs.
Oh, absolutely. It's a very real feeling for a lot of people. The BBC shared the story of Claire, a PR professional.
Right.
She likes her job, but she's feeling uneasy because tools like ChatGPT are getting so good so fast.
Yeah, you hear that a lot.
And it's not just anecdotal. The article cited a Goldman Sachs report estimating AI could potentially replace something like 300 million full-time jobs.
That's a staggering number.
It is. And a PwC survey found nearly a third of workers worried about their job being replaced by tech soon. Even creatives like copywriters, the BBC mentioned Ellis Marshall, are questioning, human creativity versus AI speed and cost.
That unease is definitely palpable. So what can people do about this anxiety? How do you cope?
Well, several sources. BBC, Abe McCormack, Horton International offered some good advice here. The core message seems to be focus on what you can control.
Okay, like what?
Like learning to work with the technology, seeing AI as a resource, a tool, maybe even a co-pilot, rather than just a threat.
So education and training are key.
Absolutely. Scott Likens from PwC stressed that. And it helps to remember, as he pointed out, we've adapted to big shifts before. Think automation in factories or e-commerce changing retail.
That's a good point. Historical context helps.
It does. Career coach Carolyn Montrose told the BBC, basically, AI isn't going away. So a positive attitude and focusing on upskilling is crucial. Letting anxiety paralyze you is probably worse than the AI itself.
Okay, but are these fears totally justified? Are robots really about to take all the jobs? The BBC mentioned some research suggesting maybe the fear is a bit overblown.
Yeah, that was an interesting counterpoint. They highlighted research by Eric Dahlin, a sociologist.
What did he find?
He found that people generally overestimate how quickly robots are actually replacing human workers. His study showed only about 14% of workers said their jobs were replaced by robots.
Much lower than the anxiety levels might suggest.
Right. And even those who were displaced tended to think it was happening faster across the board than it really was. His point was, just because the tech can do something doesn't mean companies will immediately adopt it everywhere for that purpose. There are costs, implementation challenges, other factors.
That's definitely a bit more reassuring.
Mm-hmm.
Which brings us to, what makes humans unique? What can we do that AI can't? Both the BBC and Aid McCormack touched on this.
Exactly. People like Stephanie Coleman from EY suggest the future is likely a blend of humans and AI working together, not just replacement.
So what are those uniquely human strengths?
Things like building genuine relationships, trust, having truly original creative sparks, emotional intelligence, empathy. AI struggles with that stuff.
Okay.
And Aid McCormack builds on this with his idea of capability thinking.
Capability thinking. Tell me more about that.
Instead of focusing just on your day-to-day tasks, which might be automatable, he says focus on your core transferable capabilities. Like complex problem solving, effective communication, building strong relationships, critical thinking, ethical judgment. These are abilities that are valuable across different roles and much harder for AI to mimic.
I see. So it's about identifying those deeper skills. How can you, listening now, start thinking that way about your own career?
It means looking past your job title. What are you fundamentally good at? What outcomes do organizations really value that you deliver? Are you great at negotiation? Leading teams? Creative strategy? Focus on those things. They're more durable.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Less about the what and more about the how and the why. This ties into lifelong learning, doesn't it? That came up repeatedly.
Absolutely. Ed McCormack, Horton International, Global HR News, they all hammered this point home. Continuous learning is non-negotiable now.
So stay curious.
Stay curious. Actively learn about AI. Take courses, watch tutorials, even just play around with tools like ChatGPT or Zapier. McCormack suggests thinking of them as co-pilots.
Getting comfortable with them.
Yeah, understanding their strengths and limitations is really powerful. It demystifies them and helps you see how you can leverage them rather than just fearing them. Think about your own skill set. Where could you maybe brush up or learn something new related to this?
And it's not just tech skills, right? Those human qualities are just as important, if not more so.
That's exactly right. McCormack and Horton International both emphasize doubling down on empathy, trust building, creativity, judgment, understanding context. That's where humans really shine.
Aid McCormack also had a point about actively engaging with how AI is being adopted in your organization. What does that mean practically?
It means don't be passive. Ask questions about how your company plans to use AI. Offer your ideas. If there are pilot programs, try to get involved.
Get a seat at the table, so to speak.
Sort of. It gives you more agency, makes you feel less like things are just happening to you. Plus, it signals to your employer that you're engaged and adaptable, which is always good.
Okay, good practical advice there. Now let's shift perspective a bit and look further down the road. How can we future-proof our careers? Horton International and Global HR News had insights here.
Yeah, Horton International tried to identify characteristics of careers that seem, let's say, more AI resistant for now.
What kinds of characteristics?
Things requiring high levels of creativity, innovation, emotional intelligence, really complex problem solving, strong leadership, management, technical expertise combined with adaptability, and very human-centric roles.
Can you give some examples?
Sure, they mentioned roles like artists, designers, therapists, healthcare providers requiring empathy, senior managers, educators, complex strategy roles, maybe specialized artisans. things where nuance, human connection, or true originality are key.
That's helpful. But Horton also added a big caveat, didn't they?
They did. They stressed that few jobs are truly 100% AI-proof in the long run. AI is getting integrated everywhere.
Like AI in medicine or education.
Exactly. AI assists in diagnosis, creates personalized learning plans, helps in drug discovery, even generates art.
Hmm.
So while some fields are more resilient, that ability to adapt and work with AI is going to be crucial pretty much everywhere.
So what are the concrete steps then? What actions can our listeners take to build this resilience?
Both sources listed several key things. First, embrace lifelong learning, constantly upskill and reskill. Use online resources, company training, whatever you can find.
Okay.
Second, really develop those soft skills. Communication, empathy, teamwork, leadership, they're becoming premium skills.
Makes sense.
Third, nurture your creativity. Think outside the box. Fourth, embrace technology, don't fear it. Learn to use AI tools. Fifth, build a strong professional network. Relationships matter. Sixth, maybe explore new or adjacent fields like AI ethics or policy if that interests you. And finally, just stay adaptable. Be open to change, learn how to pivot when needed.
That adaptability piece seems key. Global HR News mentioned a reskilling imperative.
Yes, they cited a World Economic Forum prediction that something like 60% of workers will need extra training by 2027. The focus is shifting heavily towards tech and analytical skills, but also that combination of tech skills and soft skills.
A blend again?
Right, and they warned about potential workforce shortages in areas like education and healthcare if these skill gaps aren't addressed.
Did they talk about which jobs are most impacted and which are emerging?
They did. Roles with routine technical tasks, some customer service, manufacturing, admin support, retail, those are seeing significant automation impact.
And the emerging ones.
Lots in AI and machine learning itself, obviously. Cybersecurity experts, data scientists, renewable energy techs, digital marketing specialists, roles in healthcare innovation and biotech, and edtech educational technology.
So a definite shift underway. Now, shifting again to a higher level view, the Economic Innovation Group article took a different angle. They argued this isn't just about tech or skills, but about economic policy.
That's a really crucial point they made. Their argument is basically, instead of trying to ban job displacing AI or steer innovation, we should focus on changing our economic policies to help people navigate this tech-driven job market.
So accept the tech is coming and focus on supporting people.
Pretty much. Take the technology as a given and build labor market policies that help people adapt and thrive alongside it.
And they argued strongly against just doing nothing, right?
Absolutely. They looked back at past transitions, farm to factory, factory to service, and pointed out how painful those were. And they highlighted that government action, like creating universal high schools or expanding college access, was actually really important in easing those transitions. Just letting it happen without support isn't a great strategy based on history.
They also had some interesting comparisons between the U.S. labor market and other countries. Flexible, but maybe not supportive enough.
Yeah, they noted the U.S. has a very flexible market, lower minimum wage relative to average, less union power, fewer regulations, a less generous safety net compared to many European countries, for example. But despite that flexibility, the U.S. doesn't actually rank highest in prime age employment rates, which suggests maybe that flexibility alone isn't enough. Maybe we lack the support systems to help people connect with and prepare for the available jobs.
So what do they recommend policy-wise, based on the present, not just guessing about the future?
Their main thrust was education and training. They pointed to data showing people with more education consistently have higher, more stable employment.
Makes sense.
So they advocate for increasing access all the way from universal preschool through college, plus more federal support for community colleges.
And focusing education on certain skills.
Yes, emphasizing those less automatable soft skills management, communication, teamwork, rather than just hard skills like, say, basic coding, which AI might handle more easily in the future.
What about direct job support? Training programs.
Big emphasis there. They pointed out the U.S. lags behind countries like Denmark in spending on active labor market policies, things like job training, apprenticeships, job search assistance.
So scale up what works.
Exactly. Find effective programs and invest in them. They even suggest using AI itself to enhance these programs. AI tutors, better job matching, but it needs sustained government commitment.
And what about the wealth generated by AI? Did they touch on that?
They did. They acknowledge that relying only on getting everyone into good jobs might be difficult, especially if automation leads to really concentrated financial gains for a few.
So redistribution might become more important.
That's what they suggest. Things like progressive taxes, broader benefit systems, maybe wage subsidies or insurance. These kinds of tax and transfer policies might need to play a bigger role in ensuring the benefits of AI are shared more broadly.
Okay, we've covered ethics, anxiety, skills, policy. What about the psychological side? For employees going through this, the IGFMR and SHRM sources looked at that.
Right, because automation isn't just about efficiency charts. It affects people's feelings about their jobs, their stress levels.
How so? Job satisfaction, for instance.
A double-edged sword, apparently. Automating boring, routine tasks that can boost satisfaction, letting people focus on more interesting strategic work. But the fear of being replaced or the stress of constantly needing to learn new skills, that can definitely decrease job satisfaction. There's a potential divide. Higher-level AI-augmented roles might feel engaging, while more traditional roles feel devalued.
And mental health, stress levels.
Similar story. The threat of displacement, the pressure to adapt constantly, that's stressful. It can lead to anxiety, burnout. But on the flip side, if AI is implemented thoughtfully, maybe reducing tedious workload, allowing for more meaningful tasks, perhaps even better work-life balance, it could potentially lower stress and boost engagement. It really depends on how it's done.
Does it impact efficiency, too? You'd assume AI makes things faster.
Mostly, yes. AI can enable faster, more precise work, better analysis, improved teamwork in some cases, but there's often a learning curve.
The initial dip.
Right. Short-term efficiency might even drop as people learn new systems. So good training and support are crucial to actually realize those efficiency gains.
Now, SHRM talked about employee resistance. Why do people resist adopting these technologies, even if they might be beneficial?
They called it automation anxiety, which connects back to the job fears we discussed, but they also highlighted an empathy gap.
Empathy gap.
Yeah, between leadership, who might see the strategic benefits, and employees who are worried about the personal impact. Leaders might not fully grasp the emotional side for their teams.
And cognitive biases play a role.
Definitely. SHRM mentioned two big ones. Status quo bias, we just prefer things the way they are. And loss aversion, we feel losses much more strongly than potential gains.
So we focus on what we might lose, not what we might gain.
Exactly. They gave examples in healthcare and finance where professionals resisted new AI tools because it felt threatening or unfamiliar, even if it could help them.
So how do leaders bridge that empathy gap and overcome resistance? SHRM had some behavioral science tips.
They did. The core idea is understanding those emotional needs. They suggested 3 strategies. First, positive reinforcement.
Like celebrating small wins.
Precisely. Recognize and reward progress as people learn and adapt to the new tools. Second, personalized learning.
Tailored training.
Yeah, not one size fits all. Training that meets people where they are and builds their confidence gradually. And third, psychological safety.
Creating a safe space.
Exactly. An environment where employees feel safe asking questions, voicing concerns, even making mistakes while learning without fear of judgment or penalty.
So practically, what should executives be doing? SHRM had some steps.
4 key things. 1, be transparent about the why. Explain the reasons behind adopting AI, not just the what. 2, customize those learning paths to build confidence. 3, actively solicit and use employee feedback to improve how the AI is implemented. Make them part of the process. And 4, recognize and celebrate the progress people are making along the way. Show appreciation for the effort.
It sounds like managing the human side is just as critical as managing the tech side.
Absolutely essential, based on this.
Okay, one last major thing. The sheer urgency and scale of reskilling. McKinsey had some pretty stark numbers on this.
They really did. They estimated that globally up to 375 million workers might need to switch occupational categories entirely by 2030 because of automation and AI.
375 million, that's massive.
Huge. They compared it to the scale of the shift from agriculture to manufacturing, but potentially happening much faster, especially for mid-career workers. And crucially, they noted, we don't really have historical precedent for reskilling people on this scale.
Is this hitting home with executives? Do they see this as a priority?
Apparently, yes. McKinsey's survey found 2/3 of executives see addressing these skills gaps as a top 10 priority. Nearly 30% put it in their top 5.
What's driving that urgency?
The accelerating pace of technological transformation, basically, that's happening faster than expected. The urgency was even higher in the US and Europe among larger companies.
And who do executives think should lead this reskilling effort? Government, individuals, companies.
Overwhelmingly, they believe corporations should take the lead by almost a 5-to-1 margin.
Interesting. So companies feel they need to retrain their existing workforce, not just hire new people with the needed skills.
Yes, 82% said retraining existing employees has to be at least half the solution. Europe seemed even more focused on retraining than the US, which leaned a bit more towards hiring.
But are companies actually ready for this?
That's the worrying part. Only 16% of business leaders felt very prepared to deal with the potential skills gaps.
Only 16%. Wow. What are the hurdles?
Things like rethinking the entire HR infrastructure to support continuous learning, and frankly, just figuring out what skills will actually be needed in the future. It's hard to predict accurately.
So effective reskilling is key. What does that look like?
It needs clear pathways to new roles, practical, hands-on training, and companies need to see a return on that investment. McKinsey mentioned a program called Generation that has a successful model for this.
What motivates companies to invest in this, besides just needing the skills?
Aligning with their mission and values was one factor, but the biggest driver, increasing employee productivity. To actually get the benefits from all their investments in AI and automation, they need their workforce to have the skills to use it effectively.
Right, the tech is only useful if people can use it.
Exactly. So leaders are asking themselves, how do we map future skills? Is it cheaper to retrain or hire? How do we tap into non-traditional talent pools? Should we partner with educational institutions or other companies? These are the big questions now.
Okay, so wrapping this all up, we've covered a huge amount of ground here.
You really have.
From the ethical tightropes of digital amplification and bias to the very real AI anxiety hitting the workforce and the absolute need to adapt by focusing on human skills and lifelong learning.
Yeah, and looking at specific ways to future-proof careers, understanding which jobs are changing, which are emerging.
Plus the bigger picture, the role of economic policy, the psychological impact on employees, how to manage change with empathy.
And finally, that massive, urgent need for reskilling, largely led by companies themselves.
Hopefully for you listening, this deep dive has cut through some of the noise, connected the dots, and given you a clearer, more informed perspective without feeling overwhelmed. We aim to give you that shortcut to understanding these complex issues.
Absolutely. And as you think about everything we've discussed, all these shifts, the learning imperative, the human skills, here's maybe one final thought for you to mull over. Considering all this, what is one specific skill, or maybe one area of knowledge, that you personally feel most compelled to explore further right now to really help you navigate and maybe even thrive in this evolving world of work? Think about the long game, the opportunities that might be hidden in all this change.